Some people are Edwards, wise, kind. Some are Henrys, hard-working, strong. Some people are Diesels. Me. That was the trouble.
If you're a Thomas fan, there's no doubt you are familiar with the infamous Steamies versus Diesel conflict that has persisted throughout the series since it was introduced all the way back in Duck and the Diesel Engine in 1958. Heck, even if you're not a Thomas fan, you probably have some awareness of the steam-diesel dynamic, even if it's the Cliff Notes version. But while the concept has gone through many iterations since its beginning, I'd like to take a look at that first book by analyzing the dynamic of the titular characters, Duck and Diesel, and discussing what makes them, as well as the story they meet in, so great. Now there are a plethora of stories in both the books and the television show that many fans would tout as the greats. Edward's Exploit, Down the Mine, or even Super Rescue if you look at the books. There's plenty more to name, but I think Duck and the Diesel Engine has so much about it that makes it so memorable and remains one of the most impactful stories. Similarly to The Sad Story of Henry, this saga takes place over the course of multiple stories with a little cliffhanger in the middle. Isn't that nice? There are many reasons you could cite for what makes this arc one of the most iconic in the series, and I'll certainly try to touch on as many as I can, but I'd like to analyze this story through the characters it uses and their respective journeys during and after this story. That's right, this time we're gonna analyze two characters in the same video.
What fun!
So what makes Duck and the Diesel Engine, as well as its adaptation to television, so great? Well, to do that, let's go over the book in its entirety. One thing that sets this book apart is the time period it takes place in, as the late 50s saw the integration of what was designated the Modernization plan that brought diesel traction to British railways. Eric Marriott, an editor of Audrey's series, thought it prudent to incorporate this aspect into the books, in order to keep the series up to date. So Audrey gave us this book as a reaction to the times he was living in. What immediately strikes me is Sir Topham Hatt's message to us before the story even starts. I do not believe that all diesels are troublesome, but this one upset our engines and made Duck very unhappy. Obviously, it's not much to go off of, but I think if we were to take this as the perspective Audrey had on diesels, I would say it reflects how there's nothing wrong with modernization as long as what came before it is recognized for getting us there. Maybe diesel is just a representation of the kind of people Audrey was thinking of at that time. Food for thought. Anyways, we begin our tale with the story of Domeless Engine, a story the television series would have made you think was its own separate story, more about Gordon than Duck. But I find its placement here to be vital. The story allows us to see a new part of Duck's character by bringing in the city of Truro, a famous Great Western engine Duck has a deep respect for, and delights in making conversation with him as though they were old friends. I try to teach them our ways, Duck says, eliciting this sense of otherness from the rest of the Soder engines. Naturally, Gordon is jealous and rude because of the rumors that the city of Truro was the first to go 100 miles per hour, and so ostracizes him for his different dome, greatly offending Duck. In typical Audrey fashion, Gordon's behavior does not go unpunished, as most of us know by now. He later loses his dome due to some strong wind. While the main conflict and events of this story have little to do with Duck and Diesel, it's an interesting introduction to the saga when looking back. We establish Duck's heritage by meeting City of Truro, while also establishing the relationship Duck has with the bigger engines like Gordon, who takes him for granted. While this story does in fact work on its own, looking at it in its proper context, it does rather well in setting up Duck's journey for the other stories, setting him up as an outspoken but confident individual. Speaking of setting up the next story, Pop Goes the Diesel opens with the line, City of Truro's visit made Duck very proud of being Great Western, which results in him getting something of a big head. This actually gives us the reason for one of Duck's most infamous lines. Say it with me now.
There's only two ways of doing things, Thomas. The Great Western way or the wrong way. I'm Great Western and don't we know it? Great Road.
While his work ethic is still immaculate, his newfound pride after being validated by a literal celebrity makes him insufferable to the other big engines. Naturally, they're glad when a visitor comes to change up that dynamic, and oh boy, does he ever. Here, we are introduced to Diesel, and the first thing he does is smooth talk the big engines to win their favor.
Is that James and Henry and Gordon too? I am delighted to meet such famous engines.
Making his welcome much different than how Gordon treated City of Truro, interestingly enough. I don't see no dome on Diesel. Duck, however, sees right through this behavior and immediately treats Diesel as hostile, as we see in their next interaction. Already, I feel a parallel with how Duck and Gordon treat both of these visitors. While Duck is quick to assess Diesel's dishonesty and mistreat him, Gordon makes irrational judgments from his jealousy because of Duck's cultural pride. In their first interaction, Duck is asked to show Diesel around. At this point, Diesel has done nothing outwardly wrong. He may be a brown-noser, but that's not a crime. And Duck doesn't hesitate to interrupt and correct Diesel when he calls Sir Topham Hatt the fat controller.
You're worthy, fat.
Sir Topham Hatt to you, ordered Duck.
I think this scene illustrates Duck's peak confidence since his meeting with Churo. And since his first appearance, Duck has been a very self-determined, no-nonsense kind of engine. But what I think is being shown here is how Duck may be a good engine, and may be right for calling out Gordon and Diesel, but it doesn't excuse what he does next. Albeit after hearing Diesel's
Revo Thingamgummy
shtick, Duck takes direct action in meting out his own sense of justice, letting Diesel struggle with the old trucks.
The car's groaned.
He even laughs and teases him afterwards. This scene echoes what we saw in Duck's strike against the big engines in his first appearance. Only this time, he's not sticking up for anything or anyone, he's doing it all for his own sense of pride. And I believe this is what leads to the crux of the story. Now, we know Diesel deserves this. I mean, he comes with his own rather sizable ego, but we don't talk enough about how Duck is his own downfall here. While we can surmise that Diesel would surely have caused trouble at some point, he wasn't incentivized until Duck sabotaged him, which allows us to see that it's actually both of these characters that are at fault. I think this is what makes this story so successful, because while we love Duck, we know both sides are wrong here. Now, Duck does try to set things straight here, since he's not the bad guy after all, and it makes him likable to us. But the damage has been done. As the narration says,
Diesel hated Duck.
Which, I mean, I feel like the word hate is never used in this series, so hearing it here is pretty impactful. What this tells us is that Diesel, well, he certainly has a very volatile personality, he feels wronged by Duck, and he kind of has a right to be. So wronged, in fact, he takes it to the point he won't even accept Duck's apology after what he's done, and immediately starts to plot against him. The very next scene, we see him exclaim to all the engines that Duck sabotaged him. Of course, the big engines come to Duck's defense, thinking no engine would ever conspire with the trucks, no matter the difference. Diesel does not listen, however, and has set his mind on revenge. By taking control of the narrative. He goes to the trucks, sacrilege, and manipulates them by giving them rude names for the big engines that he says Duck made up. The big engines are outraged and shut Duck out from the sheds, once again echoing his first day. When Sir Topham Hatt intervenes, Duck can't prove himself innocent, not before getting some final sass on the engines.
I only wish, sir, he said gravely, that I'd thought of those names myself, if the dome fits.
Okay, how was that supposed to help his case? I have no idea. But despite his innocence and Sir Topham Hatt's suspicions, Duck is sent away to Wellsworth to work with Edward, leaving Diesel victorious. On the one hand, Duck is wrongly accused here and is punished for something he didn't do. But on the other hand, I think what he did to Diesel brought upon this punishment. This, as well as his boastful attitude at the beginning of the book, not helped by how well he thinks the dome fits, does not portray him in the best light. While we're certainly inclined to take Duck's side in all of this, because we know the big engines are being pig-headed and we could see Diesel showed troubling signs, I think it's interesting to find the nuances of the writing here that give us flaws on each side of the conflict. It may certainly be easier to focus on how Diesel did Duck dirty, but there's no doubt in my mind that there was some intention to how we got from City of Churo to Diesel, and how these two visitors impacted Duck. So even though we know the big engines are wrong, and Diesel is the bad guy here, there are still reasons for how Duck got here in the first place. Alright, now for the part we all know and love. A close shave. A barbershop story almost as iconic as Sweeney Todd, but with no blood. For this finale, we find Duck in disgrace, confiding in Edward. However, while the support is nice, it doesn't change the sorry situation he's in, and Duck's situation seems hopeless. All of a sudden, as Duck is coming back from a job, a runaway line of trucks comes barreling after him. With some quick thinking, Duck and his crew adjust their speed to slow down the trucks and crash into a nearby barbershop. and luckily, no one was hurt. Of course, Duck is praised for his heroics by everyone and is welcomed back into their good graces. Sir Topham Hatt even tells him that Diesel was sent packing after he found him out. A nice, happy little ending, huh? Okay. So here's my big brain analysis of the story. I purport that barbershop symbolizes a fresh start for Duck. Oh wow, very astute, right? I hear you say. The place where Duck just so happens to do a good deed represents his redemption. Here's the part where you have to hear me out. The whole purpose of a barbershop is to make ourselves look good, right? It's an establishment meant for aesthetics. Here, however, Duck crashes through the wall of the barbershop after being labeled
Disgraceful, disgusting, despicable.
not only proving himself a good engine morally, but breaking down the labels and accusations that have been put upon him. To add to this, the barber, after he's done throwing a fit over the wall, lathers Duck in shaving cream to mock him, but quickly washes it all off when he finds out the good deed he has done, which one might say could represent Duck being absolved of all misgivings about him, and quite literally being cleansed. Alright, look, it's a little on the nose, but I think it's clever. This is what I think makes this story so impactful, aside from the awesome crash, of course. I mean, come on. The integrity Duck has, despite all of his doubters and those who would plot against him. He came to Edward's line feeling sorry for himself, but when the time came, he did not hesitate to rise to the occasion. That's why his redemption at the barbershop is so satisfying. After all the confusion and lies of the last few stories have made his life so difficult, when he finally does a clear-cut good deed, it's almost baffling to finally hear things go right for Duck.
I'm sorry. I didn't know you were being a brave engine. That's all right, sir. I didn't know that either.
In this moment, we find a Duck who is not concerned with the Great Western Way or the Diesel Revolution, but in doing a good deed for the sake of it, no matter what the appearance. The final message of this book is clear, that truth and integrity will prevail, but what I love about the way it's done here is that in order for that to happen, you gotta stay true to yourself, even when everyone's against you. It's inspiring. Now that we've looked at the story in its entirety, I want to discuss both of these characters as individuals. To start, let's talk about Duck. Duck is a great character, and as we discussed, he is a character of integrity. What makes him such a great protagonist here is his no-nonsense attitude that not only makes him admirable, but still gets him into conflicts. I really like how this comment from Bibliomancer91 puts it. Duck, from the very start, actively pushes back against social hierarchies, especially as they exist with bullying as a primary means of reinforcing them. On the whole, he's passionate about what's just, as well as notably thoughtful, even when measuredly engaging with other engines' mistreatment. Plus, his unique yet almost entirely unboasted design as a pannier tank engine conveys a healthy sense of individuality and comfortability in being oneself. I feel like this is a great analysis and perfectly sums up his character. I would even add that Duck, especially in this story, has a sense of righteousness to him. When he first arrives on the island and stands up to the big engines to when he stands up to Diesel, Duck is never afraid to put those he feels are doing wrong in their place. Where that becomes a flaw, however, is when he starts to treat those same individuals as below him. When City of Truro reaffirms how great Western heritage is, that is when we see Duck at his worst, patronizing the big engines for not doing things the Great Western
Way.
Like, these guys are just sitting here, and Duck comes along lecturing them. Then Diesel comes along, almost as if to throw his very mentality back at him, telling him how great diesels are, giving him a taste of his own medicine. And what does Duck do? He tricks him and laughs at him. To his face! We see here the pride Duck holds in believing he has the moral high ground, and takes it too far. He is proud of his Great Western heritage, as he unabashedly wears the letters GWR on his side tanks, and in the Railway series, keeps his original Great Western Railway number. It is evident that Duck is more than a little chuffed to be a Great Western engine, and from the history I've looked at, the railway itself is a very proud one too. Sambard Kingdom Brunel, I think I pronounced that right, the one who built the railway, set out to create one of the finest railways in the world, and with a name like that, kinda tracks. It is the oldest of the big four railways that ran all over England and was renowned for its feats in engineering and innovation. Heck, some people refer to it as God's wonderful railway. So that's got to give you some idea of what the general feelings were of this place. Indeed, it was a railway of progress, innovation, and culture. So it only makes sense that the first, and at the time, only Great Westerner on Sodor should hold these same qualities. He undoubtedly feels immense pride in all of these facts, and to represent that part of railway culture should hold a lot of weight to Duck. It is only natural then that when City of Truro is insulted by Gordon and domeless engines, this symbol of great Western culture, his hero, it personally insults Duck too, a bruise to his pride and sets something off in him, so much so that he feels he needs to overcompensate and educate the other engines. I find this development in Duck strikes a shocking resemblance to the psychology of nationalism, or even white nationalism, which is the belief that one group, in this case white people, are superior to all others. Now wait, I'm not calling Duck a white supremacist. He is far from it. That would be crazy. This video would be completely going off the rails. And yes, that is the third train pun I have made in the last 2 minutes. I just realized. What I'm trying to say is how interesting the connection is. And you'll see why in a second. Just stay with me. According to Quintan Wiktorowicz, who developed a model on understanding the process of radicalization, those who subscribe to the idea that their group is superior to all others begins with a cognitive opening, a trauma, stressor, or grievance that makes people question their prior beliefs and makes them more open to alternative worldviews or ideas. Stressors that imply lost status, such as social rejection or job loss, can especially be frustrating if combined with a sense of entitlement, or can produce shame when paired with social narratives that imply they have fallen short of cultural ideals for their in-group. So when Duck is slighted by Gordon at the beginning, he feels he loses status and is compelled to regain it. Why I feel this is an important part of the discussion is because Duck is not a nationalist. I'm gonna tell you again, he is not an extremist, none of that. He is an honest, down-to-earth sort of character who is proud of his heritage, and that's fine. And while he will accept no nonsense from those around, big or small, when his very culture is insulted, he can get sensitive about it. What I think Audrey does here is present us with a situation that is super relatable and probably very personal to him. Audrey was a man infatuated with railway culture, and he was adamant about the accuracy. Just look at the storybook illustrations and how many changes were made because Audrey wanted accurate railway depictions in his books. Needless to say, I think we all have something we take joy in, and when we share that joy with others, a pride in that same something is born. Take this fandom, for example. So when someone comes along and rains on our parade, it's kind of hard not to get mad about it. The lesson I think that's being taught here is that you shouldn't give in to that negativity and let it blind you to sense. Duck's downfall here is that in his overcompensation for his cultural pride, he steps on all others around him. And hey, you don't have to look too far today to see what that kind of pride does to people. What matters most is how you take care of others, as Edward takes care of Duck, as Duck does his best to protect the people in the barbershop, and as Sir Topham Hatt has faith in his engines. It's okay to take pride in your culture, but never put that above the value of other people. This is why I really love the episode All at Sea for Duck, because it shows the wonder Duck takes in something other than the railway for a moment. While he knows at the end of the day that he is an engine, and he cannot change that, and he lives there on the island and nowhere else, he doesn't let his role in the world stop him from appreciating another aspect of life. I think it's one of the few Duck-centered stories out there that feels like a real progression of his character. As he learned the value of integrity at the end of Close Shave, he learns here the value of things beyond just the self. And I don't think I heard a single mention of the Great Western Railway in this episode, so maybe that tells you something. Anyways, we've talked about Duck and his story a pretty great deal in this video already, so now it's only fair I discuss the other main character in this video, Diesel. Yes, finally discussing Thomas and Friends' most iconic antagonist, the character that was meant to be a one-off that became basically a main cast member in the show. I mean, heck, nowadays he pretty much is, with All Engines Go and the new show coming out. So what makes Diesel here such an effective antagonist? Well, I think it's because he's a complete sociopath. Sorry, let me explain. We've talked about his role in Duck and the Diesel Engine a little bit, and how he works as the antagonist there. He is the mirror image of Duck. He takes pride in his diesel culture, and makes it known from the very beginning. He comes to the island with the intention of manipulating everyone so that he may acquire social power.
The silly engines were flattered.
And when things don't go his way because of Duck, he immediately puts into motion plans to ruin Duck's reputation so that he can have his way. We see these same behaviors succeeded in stories like Thomas and the Evil Diesel by Christopher Audrey and Diesel Does It Again, an episode based on magazine stories done by Andrew Brenner. In all of these stories and beyond, I posit many of these behaviors fall in line with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM for short, and their definition of sociopathy, or antisocial personality disorder, ASPD for short. In both of these stories, we see Diesel acting as he did in his debut, either acting shady and sly or just outright rude. And in both stories, he once again abuses the trucks, shunting them too hard, either through a wall or into the sea. But he never apologizes for these actions or shows remorse. Other traits and actions, such as deceitfulness and his scheming nature, fill out the rest of the criteria for the DSM. So let's go through each to paint the picture. Number 1. Failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors, as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. Diesel twice refers to Sir Topham Hatt as the Fat Controller despite knowing it is disrespectful. The second time, he corrects himself only to serve his goals of deceit. Okay, so this is not unlawful, but I would argue it's like an unspoken rule that Diesel breaks a number of times. Alright, look, if you're not satisfied with that answer, refer back to the into the wall part I just mentioned with the trucks. Number 2, deceitfulness, as indicated by repeated lying, use of aliases, or conning others for personal profit or pleasure. I mean, do I even have to explain this one? His whole scheme against Duck, manipulating the big engines, as well as manipulating Fergus into leaving the cement works in season 7, yeah, I bet you didn't think of that one, straight up lying to his face just to get him to leave, and lying to all of the engines on multiple occasions. Number 3, impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. And 4, irritability and aggressiveness, as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. I think these two kind of go hand in hand for Diesel, as he is very aggressive towards the trucks, and his aggression towards the trucks results in damage and landing him in trouble because he didn't think about the consequences. Number 5, reckless disregard for safety of self or others. And number 7, lack of remorse, as indicated by being indifferent to or rationalizing having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. Again, see all of the above. And number 6, consistent irresponsibility, as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. I don't think I'm going to talk about this one because I don't know what Diesel's financial situation is, and I'm not going to ask. So to sum up, Diesel frequently shows little to no remorse for others, like ruining Duck's reputation, sending him away, or even bumping into Percy. Although not meaning to, he doesn't even apologize, and tricking Fergus to leaving the cement works. It is also his impulsivity and aggression that fuels this disregard for safety and others. In order to get a better understanding of the idea that Diesel exhibits signs of ASPD, I want to refer to one thesis paper done by Maya Zahavi that looks at depictions of characters in media with ASPD, such as Dexter Morgan and Alex DeLarge from Clockwork Orange, which are a little more intense than Diesel, but never mind. In this paper, Zahavi also analyzes the book Confessions of a Sociopath, A Life Spent Hiding in Plain Sight, written by M.E. Thomas, a professor documenting her life after being diagnosed with ASPD. This paper sets out to understand those with sociopathic personalities and their condition fully. And by examining the work done here, I'd like to see what we can apply and understand about Diesel. Zahavi collects many works to illustrate that those with ASPD are human beings whose capacity to feel was limited early in life by emotional modeling they did not receive and environmental circumstances they did not choose. While we don't know Diesel's backstory, I'd like to put forth my own theories and work with what we know to illustrate the character of Diesel as a whole, going beyond how we first met him in his debut. From the research done on ASPD, it appears there are many factors that come into play when diagnosing, like genetics, epigenetics, environment, and so on. And just so you know, I'm not even going to try discussing trained genetics, so don't worry about it. For the sake of this video, we'll just keep it to environmental factors. As Zahavi puts it best, with ongoing debate about its potential for treatment, its etymology, and most notably in this work, its etiology, it is imperative to conceive of ASPD as an endpoint achieved through myriad pathways and distinct ratios of nature versus nurture related factors depending on individual circumstances. With that said, in order to understand what conditions helped foster these tendencies in Diesel, it's only right we look at other Diesels from his railway that have visited the island. Diesels like D261 or Bowler, D199 or Spam Can, and even lesser known Diesels like old stuck-up. The list goes on, but many of these diesels maintain the same belief that they are superior and steam should be scrapped. As such research suggests, environmental conditions cultivate the callous, unemotional qualities found in those with sociopathic personalities. My point here is that these diesels hold little regard for those they deem less than, and will act rudely or callously and sometimes completely ignore all safety procedures because of their own egos. I think it can be surmised that these personalities influenced Diesel, fostering those traits and cultivated them. I believe the case can be made that Diesel was certainly predisposed to being a sociopath before encountering these other Diesels. Traits like his aggression and manipulation may be his alone to bear. But I argue that working and living in their environment only made all those qualities more prominent. While these factors could explain the traits we see in Diesel now, and a lot of those traits align with the textbook definition of ASPD, nothing is without nuance. So I'd like to talk about the softer side of Diesel here. In her book, Emmy Thomas details her life as it corresponds to the qualities one with ASPD would have, and how it impacts her perception of things. How everything is more or less a step to climbing the social ladder, or a struggle for power. She goes over how she would hurt people who have wronged her for the sake of social achievement, or how easy it is to gain a position as a lawyer, for example, because it required a methodical approach with less emotion that came easily to her. But after all of this, what remains a key point in her story is that she does try to actually be normal, in her own words, even if it is in vain. Although she knows she doesn't understand and connect with people in the conventional sense, she maintains that she wants to feel love, and that she belongs in the world like anyone else. With this in mind, I would like to make the case that this sentiment is felt and even extended by our man Diesel. While he shows qualities of one with ASPD, thanks to his myriad appearances after his debut, we have plenty of content to reference that adds depth to his character. For instance, when we discussed the story Thomas and the Evil Diesel, before Diesel is sent away again for absolutely obliterating those trucks, he happens to be the only engine available when Thomas has an accident on his line. Albeit reluctantly, Diesel helps Thomas, Annie, and Clarabelle back onto the tracks, and gets a genuine thank you from Clarabelle, and even from Thomas at the end of the day. The story ends with Thomas hoping that he does come back, and Diesel actually smiles back. This story almost perfectly captures the desire to belong that Emmy Thomas discusses in her book. We see Diesel showcase his tendencies for aggression or manipulation in his quest for power or status, but what stories like this show us is that what he really wants is to be noticed. While this might seem cliche, I think the way Diesel's character is done when looking at the series as a whole is actually an interesting version of this archetype. Another interesting story that brings another angle to this quality are those magazine stories Andrew Brenner wrote. While the episode Diesel does it again adapts the stories Trouble in the Harbor Yard and Bumps, Diesel's story is actually continued in two more stories, Diesel's Race and A Trick on Bill and Ben, which, now that I look at it, I think is the only time these three characters have ever interacted in a story, I think. You let me know. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I cannot find a single place that had these magazine stories available. Nowhere. So I have to rely on the summaries provided by the Thomas Wiki, which, look, I trust the Thomas Wiki with my life, so take it or leave it. But going off of what these stories are supposed to be about, what I glean is the twins play a trick on Diesel for pushing those China clay trucks into the sea, so they tell him they want to race. And to make a short story even shorter, this story is basically the story of Bill or Ben from the CGI series, so they trick Diesel into a fake race, and he loses. In return, however, Diesel decides to play a trick on them in the next story, to which Duck and Percy are very suspicious, and warn him not to be cruel to Bill and Ben. Diesel assures them that he means them no harm, and sure enough, he tricks the two twins into pulling the same train at opposite ends. And everyone laughs, because if there's anything that brings engines together, it's getting back at Bill and Ben, Soder's resident tricksters. So while there isn't a whole lot to draw from here, I'd like to think that the intention here from Brenner was to give Diesel some sort of redemption. Maybe to give him a reason to be a recurring character. I don't know. When Duck and Percy warn him not to be mean, I think he actually kind of listens here, and maybe this trick was not only a way to get back at the twins, but a way of gaining favor with the other engines. I think this fits with not just his desire for status, but his desire for acceptance. And hey, if you think I'm grasping at straws here, fine. But I think the next story is an even better example of this. The season 10 episode Emily and the Special Coaches centers around the envy Diesel feels when Gordon is meant to receive special coaches for breaking a record. He tries to tell Emily about how he broke a record, but for some reason, she has like the most intense hatred for him.
Well, there's nothing special about smelly old Diesels, pouted Emily.
Like, the dude is just existing. Calm down, man. Anyways, after literally harassing this guy for apparently no reason, Diesel takes the coaches and hides them in retaliation. When his engine starts to act up, he reveals where he hid the coaches and gets a moment to tell Emily that he also set a record for having shunted the most trucks on the island. Emily suddenly gets a change of heart and asks Sir Topham Hatt to get Diesel a new working engine, and everybody's happy. While not as eloquent or subtle in its delivery, this episode demonstrates the lasting appeal of Diesel's character, I think. He seeks acknowledgement, and when things don't go his way or he is met with some sort of resistance, he is just as quick to react with pettiness or straight up aggression. Like Christopher Audrey's story before it, this story seeks to depict Diesel as more than just a pantomime villain, by bringing in more of a personal goal for his actual character. Instead of being obligated to do good, he wants outright to be acknowledged for his accomplishments. For him, this accomplishment is not a matter of Diesel supremacy, but an individual achievement that he thinks he deserves credit for. He never talks down to Emily, nor does he even try to trick her into thinking anything. For once, he is forthright and honest about something that he did, and for some reason, Emily decides to be a complete jerk about it. But that's not the point. So when he is treated this way, you understand why he falls back into his tricks and pettiness. Naturally, what he does isn't exactly good by any means, but it showcases the two parts of his character that make him most appealing: his deviousness and his solitude. These traits become more prominent with Diesel even as he takes on the role of the main antagonist of the show in later seasons. As time went on, writers just seemed to forget that Diesel wasn't really supposed to be a mainstay on the island, but I think the potential for his character wasn't lost on him. The iconic scheming nature he had allowed for plenty of story opportunities, but also giving a softer side far underneath that also allowed for the slight chance at redemption. No matter what, whatever it is he does is always out of self-interest, but underneath there is a need to be acknowledged, to be recognized. So even when we see him do horrible things, what all these writers have done is give us the sense that he might change. I think this brings up an important discussion to be had about what villains are and why we enjoy them. Diesel started as a great villain. He schemed, he plotted, and caused lots of trouble, all while having no arc or development. And though he would get many chances to change or redeem himself, he would always revert to the antagonist, ever isolating himself from the rest of the cast, so that whenever we see Diesel, we'll never know for sure if he'll ever change for good. Okay, so we've talked about the story of Duck and Diesel, and we've talked about each character respectively. They are pitted against each other as enemies in this book when they are really mirror images of the other. The book itself is really a journey charted out for Duck so that he may learn to temper his pride. But it isn't another prideful engine like Gordon or James who catalyzed this lesson. No, it's a completely new element entirely. In his original depiction, Diesel is characterized as a total sociopath, completely full of himself and his kind, to the point where he feels that steam engines should be put to the side to make way for progress. And when Duck refutes that for the sake of his own pride, so much that he would rather make a fool of Diesel, Diesel is quick to plot against him. The story showcases the two facets of pride and its pitfalls. And when we look at these characters as they progress with the franchise over the years, we find that when Duck learns to take pride in his actions rather than a label, it is much more fulfilling. What we see from Diesel is that it takes a lot longer for him to find any satisfaction, let alone a sense of belonging, because of how little he cares for others. His quest for power leaves him with less than what he had before and spawns the bad reputation he gets from the others, as we see with Emily when she completely shoots him down. So even when he is desperate for connection, he has already sabotaged himself. In a sense, the dichotomy of Duck and Diesel I find very pertinent to our own reality, especially today. Many conversations I see in daily life or here online revolve around personal culture and what a symbol or figure means to them. I mean, just look at this new Thomas show coming out on how people react to the design changes. What makes Duck's journey such a great one is that he starts in a place easily identifiable. Something very dear to him is put down, and in response he chooses to put his culture above everyone else. You don't have to look very far far to see stuff like that today. Riding this high he gets over the Great Western Way leads him to butt heads with Diesel, who just like Duck, puts his kind over the others. In the end, when Duck redeems himself by proving what kind of engine he is, there's no mention of the Great Western Way, and the engines are glad to have him back because he's the kind of engine they can depend on in their community. And when we next see Duck as the lead of an episode, he comes to appreciate the vastness of the world around him without so much as a mention of anything Great Western. Diesel, on the other hand, is sent packing, time and time again, because he presents himself dishonestly through manipulation and outright lies. Diesel represents the kind of pride that disconnects people and puts them against each other. The kind of pride that puts one group above all others by whatever means necessary. We know on a practical level that Diesel kept returning because of the appeal of his character, but to take my shot in the dark, I would say that what brought him back was his own desire for redemption and belonging. The progress he had praised when he first arrived never stopped with him. After Diesels came electric engines and even high-speed engines. So at this point, Diesel is as out of place in the modern world as any steam engine. Perhaps through his rough exterior, Diesel now sees himself more in the soda engines than before, and although he may never express it, he feels he might just belong with them. Duck and the Diesel Engine is a story about culture, honesty, and timelessness. While we all may take pride in our identities or other parts of ourselves, it is crucial we remain aware of how we let our identities coexist with others. Great things can come from finding solidarity with others through a shared pride, so long as we don't put that feeling above someone else's value. These characters show us how pride can be a lonely thing, how it can isolate us from others, and that's certainly not a way to live. One might even say the wrong way, and take it from Duck.
There are two ways of doing things, the Great Western Way or the wrong way.
Alright, that has been my double-decker analysis. Something I didn't even think I could do. Well, not until now. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'm really surprised at myself for making this video because I didn't know what I was going to actually do. This was a really experimental video for me. 2 character analyses at once is pretty crazy. So yeah, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching this whole video if you made it to the end. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your support, and all the comments are so freaking great. Bibliomancer91, shout out to you. It was a great analysis. I really like seeing the sort of thoughts and analyses people put out there. It's great. I love it. It's such a good time. And feel free to recommend any characters you want to see, whatever that may look like. I really love it. I love the recommendations. I'm always happy to do them. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for watching. You guys are great. And I love you. Bye.